Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Chase was always someone who valued stability more than anything else. He grew up in a simple family, where everything was earned through hard work and patience, and that shaped the way he saw the world. At 32, he had already achieved more than many people his age. Working as a real estate analyst, he organized his life meticulously, planning every step, every investment, every choice. When he finally bought the house of his dreams in Riverside, he felt like he was exactly where he should be. It was spacious, comfortable, and more than anything, it represented his effort translated into concrete, wood, and quiet achievements. It was right after this purchase that he met Jenna Wallace. She showed up like one of those coincidences that seemed to be fate's doing. He was looking for a professional to help redecorate some rooms, and the recommendation came from an old client. Jenna was an interior designer, charismatic and full of ideas. The first conversation between them was professional, but Chase found himself interested in much more than the projects and sketches she presented with enthusiasm. There was something about her that made him lower his guard, which wasn't common. Chase was reserved. But with Jenna, the conversations flowed naturally, as if they had known each other for a long time. The meetings started becoming more frequent. First, to discuss details of the decoration. Then, for coffee, to talk about life, to exchange confidences. In just a few weeks, Chase could no longer hide his interest, and he realized Jenna felt the same. The connection was obvious, and the closeness happened without great efforts. When he realized it, she was already part of his routine. She sent messages in the morning wishing him a good day, stopped by the house to show new ideas or just to spend time. Little by little, without rushing or dramatic declarations, the two were together. The decision to formalize the relationship came naturally. Chase, meticulous as always, thought, pondered, analyzed. But there was a conviction inside him that left no room for doubts. He wanted Jenna by his side. The wedding happened simply, intimately, without fanfare. Only the closest ones knew. Jenna moved in permanently to Chase's house and seemed excited to transform that space into a true home. She brought new cushions, paintings, small objects that she placed here and there, always with a smile on her face and creative explanations for each choice. Chase observed that with satisfaction. Not only for the aesthetics, but for the feeling of finally living what he always wanted. Over time, he began to notice small things that made him admire that woman even more. Jenna seemed to have a talent for taking care of details, and this extended far beyond decoration. She made organized grocery lists, prepared improvised dinners using recipes she found online, left notes on colorful papers in the fridge. Each of her actions reinforced the idea that he had found a partner he could count on. Chase felt that, for the first time, he wasn't carrying the burden of life alone. The house, which before was just the realization of his efforts, now gained a soul. In conversations with colleagues at work, he mentioned Jenna with pride. He talked about how she transformed spaces, the lightness she brought, the way she managed to make even the most tiring days end with a smile. Slowly, Chase, who had always been more introspective, began to open up more to the world around him. He felt lighter, more complete. Jenna's presence by his side gave a new meaning to the days. He started to believe that he had finally left behind the lonely days. Weekends took on a new dynamic. Sometimes they did movie marathons, other times they went out to explore the city. Nothing was grand, but everything seemed meaningful. And that was exactly what Chase had always sought, meaning. They didn't fight, at least not until then. Jenna had a calm way of dealing with differences, and Chase admired that. He saw the relationship as something solid, something built with care. Trust grew. And because of that, when she said she was thinking about quitting her job to start her own studio, he supported her. Because he believed in her. Because he believed they were together to strengthen each other, not just to share an address. He looked at her and saw future. He saw plans being drawn with firmness. He saw the possibility of growing old with someone who understood him, who made him laugh effortlessly, who gave importance to the small things. Chase was a practical man, but his heart also knew how to recognize when something was worth it. And Jenna, at that moment, seemed to be worth every second invested. Jenna's decision to leave her job came almost impulsively, but it was covered by a speech of courage and reinvention. She said she was stuck in outdated rules, that her talent deserved to fly free, that opening her own studio was a necessary step to grow. Chase listened to each argument carefully. She spoke with such passion that it was hard to doubt. And at that point in the relationship, he still believed her intentions were aligned with everything they had built so far. He himself had taken risks in his career and knew how difficult it was to break away from stability. So, he gave support. She submitted her notice at her previous job, and in the following weeks, she dove into notes, draft logos, ideas for the name of the studio. She spoke enthusiastically, scattered papers around the house, spent hours on the computer researching suppliers, drawing inspiration from other designers' projects. Chase even found it beautiful, how motivated she seemed. But as the days passed, the first imbalances began to appear. The initial enthusiasm was replaced by anxiety that she disguised with optimistic phrases. She said it was normal, that in the beginning everything is difficult, that all it took was focus. Chase, patient, continued to believe. With time, he ended up bearing all the household expenses. Rent for the space she would use as an office, purchase of materials, software subscriptions, even online courses promising to teach marketing techniques. Jenna said it was all an investment. And Chase, used to thinking long-term, tried to keep an open mind. The problem was that results didn't show up. No regular clients, no completed projects, no concrete proposals. Just ideas, more ideas, and enthusiasm that increasingly seemed to cover a void. He tried to talk a few times, suggesting that maybe it would be better to find a part-time job while the studio grew. Jenna countered with arguments about focus, about not dispersing energy. She said she felt she was about to turn the key. And although her words sounded confident, Chase began to notice other signs. There was a lack of clarity about where the money was going. When he asked, she changed the subject or said she already had everything under control. Trust me, that once sounded sweet now started to bother him. In addition to finances, came subtle changes in her behavior. Jenna got irritated easily. She started responding with sarcasm whenever he questioned something. Left without warning when she would go out, came back with bags she couldn't explain and put them off as studio stuff. Chase tried not to be controlling, hated the idea of watching over someone, but began to feel discomfort that was hard to ignore. The nights became silent. She seemed always busy, always with something to solve, but without bringing anything concrete. One weekend, while he was organizing the monthly budget, he noticed the joint account had a balance well below expected. Checked the transactions and found expenses made with a card he never used. Purchases of equipment, transfers to unknown accounts. He noted everything down and waited for a calmer moment to ask. Jenna heard, rolled her eyes, and said she was handling it, that he needed to stop acting like an accountant. That answer cut Chase deep. Not for the tone, but for the coldness. It was like he was talking to a stranger. Still, he tried giving her one more chance. Thought maybe she was under pressure, that maybe she was afraid of failing and reacting that way. But everything began to worsen when he discovered a debt Jenna had kept hidden. Received a call from an unknown number. The person, very polite, introduced themselves as a freelancer and mentioned an old debt related to the studio. Chase said he didn't know what he was talking about and asked for more details. The man explained that he had done graphic work for the launch of the brand and that despite several reminders, the payment remained unpaid. He was polite, but direct. Said he called Chase because he knew he was the financial manager of the household. After hanging up, Chase stood there, staring at nothing. That didn't make sense. Jenna had never mentioned this freelancer, nor any debt. It was more than just a financial problem, it was a secret. And secrets corrode. He took a deep breath and went to look for records on the computer, something that would explain the origin of that debt. He was searching for clarity. But what he found was a trail that would lead him to a truth much harsher than he had imagined. Chase couldn't keep it to himself anymore. He spent hours digesting that unexpected call from the freelancer, decided to confront Jenna. Waited for her to come back from the market, put the phone aside, and went straight to the point. Asked firmly, without beating around the bush, "A freelancer called me about your debt. Do you know what I'm talking about?" Jenna froze for a second, but quickly frowned. Said that wasn't his business, that the guy shouldn't have called, that he had been invasive and bad timing. Tried to minimize the situation, saying that everything was under control. "I was going to resolve it. I just need time," she affirmed, crossing her arms as if expecting to end the discussion right there. Chase, however, didn't accept that answer. Looked at her with the calm of someone who was already tired of being lied to. Said he wouldn't give another penny. That he had already done the possible and even the impossible to support her plans. Now, it was up to her. If she really wanted to take that business forward, she would have to learn to deal with the consequences of her own choices. Jenna's expression changed instantly. The forced sweetness gave way to clear irritation. Accused Chase of being too hard. Said he had become unbearable, that he had been picking on her all the time. "Do you think starting a studio from scratch is easy? Do you think it's just a matter of snapping your fingers and everything works out? You don't understand anything about how my world works," she complained. Spoke loudly, as if the blame was his for not funding her impractical dream. The argument ended without resolution. Jenna left, slamming the door. Chase stayed in silence, trying to understand how things had turned out that way. Days passed without discussing the issue. Pretended normality, but the climate between them was no longer the same. He, increasingly distant. She, more impatient and irritable. Weeks later, Chase casually asked during breakfast if she had resolved the issue with the freelancer. Jenna replied with a vague smile, "It's already paid." Chase raised an eyebrow. "Paid? With what money?" She looked directly at him, set her mug on the table, and answered, "You told me to fend for myself. And that's what I did. I found a way." The answer was dry. And the way she said it woke something up inside Chase. A discomfort he still couldn't translate, but that, soon, would find a name. It was a common Saturday when Jenna suggested they have lunch with their parents. Chase agreed. He thought it would be a way to distract his head, breathe a bit from the tension that had been building up in the last weeks. The in-laws' house always had a familiar and simple air, and despite recent misunderstandings, he didn't want to ruin the mood. They were sitting at the table, with plates being served and random conversations filling the atmosphere, when Jenna's mom dropped a question that hit Chase like a punch in the stomach. "Honey, did you resolve that issue with Patrick?" Jenna froze for an instant. Didn't respond immediately, only looked at her mom with an expression Chase couldn't decipher. But it was Chase who broke the silence. "Who is Patrick?" Mom, unaware of the sudden tension, responded naturally. "Your ex-boyfriend. He works as a freelancer. He came to our house a few weeks ago saying you owed him money. I found it strange that he came after that here, but he seemed really upset." Chase's fork stopped halfway. Jenna remained silent. The conversation at the table dissolved right there. The lunch continued in uncomfortable silence, interrupted only by the sounds of cutlery and the careful words of Jenna's dad, trying to change the subject. But Chase was already somewhere else, going over everything he had heard. The name Patrick had never been mentioned by her. Never. The ride back home was tense. In the car, Chase broke the ice. "So you hired your ex-boyfriend to work on your studio?" Jenna, without changing her voice, replied. "Yes. What's the problem? He's good at what he does." We had worked together before. The problem is you hiding that. Why didn't you tell me? She sighed. I didn't think it was important. It was professional work. Chase took a deep breath, trying to contain his irritation. And how did you get money to pay him? Did you borrow from someone? Jenna turned to the opposite direction, looking out the window. It's already solved. Let's not talk about this. The rest of the drive was made in silence. Upon arrival, Jenna went straight to the bedroom, while Chase stayed in the living room for a while, ruminating over the conversation. There was something there that still didn't make sense. The lack of clarity, the evasive answers, the story with the freelancer, now revealed as her ex-boyfriend. Chase's head pounded, one doubt after another. By late afternoon, while Jenna was out and said she would stop by the studio to review a project, Chase decided to go there. Told himself it was just a talk, maybe to better understand all that confusion. When he arrived, he found the door unlocked. Called her name, but got no response. The bathroom light was on, indicating she was inside. Chase entered, still hesitant, and sat on her work chair. Her computer was on, with the email screen open. On impulse, his eyes ran through the emails. And that's when he saw it. Subject, new job. Email sent by Jenna to Patrick, I have another service. Interested? And the reply right below, yes, but this time I want money. Not you in my bed to settle a debt. Chase read that several times, not believing it. Each word seemed to hammer directly into his consciousness. The world spun, anger and shock mixed with a deep pain. When he heard the sound of the bathroom door opening, he didn't move. Jenna came out, saw Chase in front of the computer and stopped in place. The color drained from her face. You are reading my emails? Her voice was weak, broken. Chase slowly turned, not taking his eyes off her. Is it true? She hesitated. Tried to deny. But faced with the evidence on the screen, she gave in. Her voice choked, full of guilt, confessed. Said it was a mistake, that she was desperate, that she didn't know what to do. That she used what she had to settle a debt that was growing and suffocating her. Said she regretted it, that it was only once. But Chase barely listened. The confession was like a blow that went through flesh, bones, and any remaining trust that still resisted. The ground disappeared beneath his feet. And nothing, absolutely nothing that Jenna said from that moment on, would have the power to fix what was done. Chase left the studio without looking back. The bitter taste of betrayal was still stuck in his throat, but he knew that from that moment on, there was nothing left to save. What existed between them had unraveled there, in the moment she confessed, without hesitation, without shame, that she had used her own body as currency to pay a debt to her ex-boyfriend. It was more than a physical betrayal. It was the collapse of everything he believed a partnership to be. Coming home, Chase went straight to the point. Went upstairs to the bedroom and started packing her bags. Separated clothes, personal items, cosmetics, books. Took everything from the closet that belonged to Jenna. Each piece folded seemed like a piece of a story that no longer existed. He didn't hesitate. Didn't allow himself to think too much. Acted automatically, like someone who had already passed the phase of pain and now only fulfilled the necessary. When he finished, he left the bags in the hallway and locked their bedroom. A few minutes later, Jenna arrived. Her face was swollen, her eyes red. She was still shaken from the argument at the studio. Opened the door and saw the bags on the floor. Called for Chase, who appeared on the stairs and looked at her firmly. She tried to approach, spoke between sobs asking for a better explanation, that everything happened in a moment of desperation, that she still loved him. But he didn't respond with shouts. Just pointed to the door. Said she already knew what to do. Said that this was a final decision. She resisted for a few seconds, begging for one more chance. But upon seeing that Chase wouldn't budge, she lowered her head and left, carrying the bags. Went directly to her parents' house, where, later, her mom called Chase asking him to consider talking. He thanked the call, but explained that everything had already passed the limit. And that now, what was left was to respect the decision both of them, in some way, had provoked. Weeks later, the lawyers handled the divorce. Everything was resolved in a civilized manner. Chase kept the house, since it was his before the marriage, and Jenna didn't contest. She signed the papers with a distant look, as if she had finally understood the weight of the choices she made. There were no legal battles, no dispute over assets. It was a clean separation. Sad, but clean. With the passing months, the routine adjusted. Chase immersed himself in work, redesigned the house, gradually erased the traces of her presence. He regained control of his own life, without haste. Jenna, according to information that came from mutual acquaintances, followed a different path. She returned to work for a small agency and, gradually, rebuilt her own stability. They never met again. No messages, no request for a reunion. Only silence. A necessary silence that said more than any word. Each one followed a different road, marked by everything they learned from each other, and, especially, by what they endured when everything collapsed. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.